Welcome to take 855 of my code. I'm Randy. This is the Valentine Goose channel. I did hit a milestone, and it was a personal milestone. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I hit a milestone, and I kind of hit it unexpectedly. So what I promised myself is, years ago when I wrote this, I know the book was released in 2017, but it was written in 2015 and even earlier. I thought, I'm going to have certain milestones that if I hit these milestones, I could release them as a clue. And so what I did was I had this clue thought out, and it kind of matched up to the milestone, but I don't want to just give it out. And I have a hint I want to give out too. Now, hints, you can give out hints, but it's like, that's because they don't really help. A clue is like very specific, and it's going to crack open the case, and you're going to just be amazed, and I don't know, it's maybe a few people might drop out of the hunt because of it. Maybe some people will join the hunt because of it. But I think it's a major clue, so I'm going to make you work for it. And so what I'm going to do is, well, first of all, like, people are always coming to me and they're like, Randy, you work in IT. You not only work in IT, but when you're on the night shift, you cover 4 countries on 2 continents, and it's not like you cover robots and network issues and programming issues and all kinds of things, and it's like you're dealing with people in India and Canada and Mexico and everywhere else, and so can you help me with this Photoshop issue? I'm like, it don't work that way. I don't use Photoshop. I don't have Photoshop. I don't know anything about Photoshop. So I'm like, hey, Kate Hudson, you're a multi-millionaire. Just hire a Photoshop guy finally. Anyway, so I'm very low tech. And if you've ever, I think I've shown enough of my apartment in other videos to see that this apartment is full of antiques. I love antiques. When I'm adding up my checkbook, I use an addiator. It's a mechanical, it's almost like the Enigma machine. You pushing the buttons, and you hit the big button on the side. You can hear the gears inside going jing, 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 jing. And I just love that. I'd rather do that than have a calculator or make a Excel spreadsheet or anything. And I only have one computer down here, and this one computer is one I found in the dumpster, and it's like I put the free version of Windows 10 on it, and it's hooked up to my little 42-inch TV, and I use it to watch Netflix and Hulu and watch emails and YouTube. But like this video I'm creating on my phone, it's just everything around me is antique. In fact, you can see up here, you can see some of my antique bell collection. There's an abacus right there. I actually know how to use an abacus. But I just I prefer to do things. When I'm looking here, I could have had this on my screen, but like, I got pages of notes. I got my other notes, and I have, that's why I'm off center, a whiteboard. And the thing about the whiteboard is I can't find the stand for it. I looked all over. I know I got a stand for it. I was going to have it on a stand, but I don't have that. So really low tech. I'm going to be holding my whiteboard, and I'm going to be showing you a few things. So what am I going to show you? Like I said, I want you guys to work for this clue. So I'm going to show you different things I do that I do to when I consider encoding a message. And this is things you can think about when you're doing other treasure hunts. And I've always talked about, like, when I see a code for the first time, there's certain things I'm going to investigate about it. So like, I wrote down all these different things here. 1 through 26 sub, 2, 3, 5, and IR and U. So this is my, like, algorithm for deciding how I'm going to encode a message. So if the message is really, really long, so let's say the message is go down to the pine trees and look between the pine trees and there's a stump, and if you go around the back of the stump and there's a hole and you put your hand in the hole, you might find the treasure. That's a really long message. Now, the easiest way to encode that would be a one-on-one substitution. So the one-on-one substitution is simply, you know, if you got A, B, C, D, make sure you can see this. A, B, C, D, E. And then let's say we're going to shift it by 5, F, G, H, I, J, K. And of course this goes on, E, F, G, H, I, and so on. So, and you know what a substitute cipher is. So if I'm encoding the word bed, B becomes G, E becomes J, D becomes I. So I got G, J, I as bed. And these kind of ciphers, if they're long enough, can just be brute force. You know, you look for the letter E is the most commonly used letter in the alphabet. The letter S is the most commonly the first letter of a word, and so on. And so if this is just a simple Caesar shift, you can figure it out. So that takes me to the second part here, the 1 through 26 substitution cipher. Because, like I said, this is for long things. But if I'm looking at a code and I see symbols, and you can have a one-on-one symbol. I'm thinking of trying to think. Sherlock Holmes had the dancing men, and that each dancing man was a letter of the alphabet. So there was 26 dancing men. As soon as you see 26, you know, hey, it's got to be a one-on-one. The Pen Cipher. I think Pen was used in one of the recent codes. But the Pen Cipher, you know, you draw a tic-tac-toe board, and you know, the blank tic-tac-toe board is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and then you draw another tic-tac-toe board and you put dots in it, and there's no real set way to do it. But so, like, say bet A, B, so B would be this, because you got A, B, C, D. E is in the middle, so E would be a square. God, I'm horrible at this. And D is on the outside, so it'd be like this. So it's different symbols, but there's going to be 26 symbols, one for each letter of the alphabet. And the problem with this is if you're encoding this in an image, it's really hard to encode in an image. So these are the kind of things you see written out, like in Sherlock Holmes and the Dancing Men. He found a long string of dancing men. So he had to figure out, you know, and he brute forced it. He's like, okay, there's 26 dancing men. That's one for each letter of the alphabet, and he cracked the code. Again, with a Pen Cipher, you're going to see, and this is assuming they didn't scramble it some other way. For instance, you could do a Caesar shift and then use that, you know, the GJI that you use for a bed, and then encode that with a Pen Cipher. So it's like a double layer of coding going on there. But that is the 1-on-1 and the 1 through 26 sub. So, but like I said, these are things you don't normally see in a long message, because or in a picture, because it's very hard to hide 26 elements in a picture. And that brings me to, let me read all this, and hopefully I'm being clear about this. To me, it's clear. I know there's certain people who are like, I hate ciphers, and they're probably not even watching at this point. But let's see. I gotta look at my notes here, because I can't deviate from this. So the second one, so 1-on-1, long, you're looking for a long string letter. And these are things like the Vigenère cipher, Enigma code, what else is there? Enigma code, Caesar cipher, anything that's a code with just a long string of letters. As long as you're using a 1 to 26 ratio, I mean, that's the best thing for really, but again, it's really hard to hide that into any sort of code or to any sort of picture, because I want to hide things in pictures. That's called steganography. And there's actually there's actually a computer code that's called steganography, where if you take a picture and you have the colors in a picture, and or each pixel in the picture, you'll have a hexadecimal code for the color that's in that pixel. And since a color only needs like 7 digits and there's 8 digits in the hexadecimal code, you can take that last digit and use that to encode a message. Or maybe it only needs the first 4 digits, and now you got 4 digits, you can encode a message. So and the picture looks exactly the same as a normal picture, and you can't tell the difference. It's just a normal picture. But they call that that's like modern steganography. But older steganography, well, it's things like, I have it down here, are things like what's in, this is from the Alchemist Star, and it's codes hidden in the picture. So I'm going to see, so the next thing I want to talk about is twos. So we got ones and twos. Now twos, if you had a 1-on-1, that's really hard to hide in a picture. But let's say you use a code of 2. So a code of 2 is using 2 elements to represent each letter. So in a picture, you can have 2 elements and switch them back and forth, or do something over and over again. And those 2 elements, each pair represents a letter, but you only need 2. So I could have like a cup and a saucer, and just rearrange the cup and the saucer over and over again to represent each letter. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's things called binary. Binary is, you hear that term thrown around. It's a numbering system on based on base 2 numbering system. And I don't know if they still teach this in school, but when I was in school, we learned, we use the base 10 numbering system. Our columns go 1, 10, 100, 1,000, because we have 10 fingers and toes, and that's kind of how we developed. The Phoenicians had a base 12 numbering system, because instead of counting on their fingers and toes, they counted the joints in their fingers, and it comes out to 12. And they counted the pads. I forget how they do that. Was it the joints or the pads? Anyway, it comes out to 12. So they had a base 12 numbering system. So you can have a base 1 number, 2, tertiary 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But if you have 2, that is binary. And I know Kaulazar's, when he did his, he talked about it was easy to discover it was binary because he had rows of 8, because he used a checkerboard, and a checkerboard has rows of 8 checkers on each board. And the problem with that is the problem with Kaulazar is that that's a computer term. Now, in a computer, you have what's called bits. And I actually have this part written down. So a bit is either on or off. So if it's off, it's a 0. If it's on, it's a 1. And that's how computers think. We've all been told this. Computers are just a bunch of 1s and 0s. But 8 bits equals a byte. And I'm going to draw this out, hopefully. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 8 bits. Now, these 8 bits represent a character. And in this case, let me draw the second one out here. This is called ASCII code. So each set of 8 bits represents one character in ASCII code. And ASCII code is a North American standard used for the English language. So you can have, this is the ASCII code, let me get it up here, for the lowercase letter a, and then this is the ASCII code for the uppercase letter A. And there's 250, technically, let me get rid of this. Technically, you have everything from all 0s to all 1s. So if you go all 0s to all 1s, that equals 255. And if you're a network guy like me, you know that 255 comes up in a lot of places. And that's because you filled out all the bits in a byte. So you can go from 0 to 111, and that's always 255 characters. So with this code, and I believe like he had a checkerboard and he put, something, and that's a good way to hide something in a picture. So you got rows of 8, and you put something in certain squares, and those represented the 1s, and the squares that were empty represented the 0s. So, like I said, if you're a computer guy, 255 comes up a lot. 255 is the max number of numbers you can have in a TCP/IP octet. It's the max. If you're in a 32-bit operating system, that's the largest file name you can have. It's the largest number of it's the largest I don't know, the largest anyway, it's the max in the computer world. So you can encode with ASCII code. You can encode 255 characters, and that includes the letters A through B, lowercase, A through Z, uppercase, a lot of your ellipses, a lot of the standard ASCII code are things like arrows, and you got all your punctuation and your 10 numbers. So there's, it all comes out to 255. And that's why sometimes if you look at a, especially if it's like a foreign language thing, and instead of characters, you get boxes or you get blanks or you get gibberish. That's because they've gone beyond the 255 and they put in, characters that are in their language only, and that doesn't translate to any of the 255 English characters. So that is a way of encoding a message. So one thing I didn't like about his was he had a hat on there. And he said, well, so you got to assume you go up, over, and then over and up. No, never change your rules. Your rules got to be set, hard, fast rules. Don't change your rules halfway through your code. If your code says rows of 8, have rows of 8. And like, I think what he did was he had an obstacle there. So he had, characters, and he said, oh, and because that obstacle's there, you got to come over a row and finish it out. Oh, that's awful. I'm sorry, but that's awful. You've changed your rules in the middle of a code, and you should never do that. Your code should work all the way through from one end to the other. It's just I didn't like it, and I don't know, that just really rubbed me the wrong way. But yeah, that's binary, but that's computer binary. So let me quiz the audience. Who was the first person to use binary code in an encoded message? And I'll give you a clue. It was in the 15th century. Yep. Francis Bacon. And you've all heard about the Bacon Code. I love the Bacon Code. And so chances are it's not going to be used in this video. But what Sir Francis Bacon did was he would write a pamphlet, and he would encode the message in the pamphlet. And the way he encoded the message in the pamphlet was he had two different fonts. And so, like, you'd have the letter A, but you'd also have the letter A with a tail. And I've seen the historical examples of this, and they're really close. And if you weren't looking for it, you probably would miss it. And then you'd have the letter B, but then you'd have the letter B with a tail, and the letter C, and the letter C with a hook. D with a tail. So here we have, and you do that through the whole alphabet. So you have two different typefaces. That's binary. That's a double number. That's a double numbering system. So what he would do is, how can I do that? He just simply numbered binary. And I think, and there's two ways of doing this, so, and I can't recall which way he did it, but you can start with 5 zeros, or if you're actually using real binary, you gotta start with 1. But I think he started with all zeros. And then in binary, you just number it out. And that's how binary works. You're incrementing each row by 1. I'm sorry, I went this way. Look, I made a perfect square and I confused myself. You're incrementing each row by 1. And so, yeah, I went down. I'm confusing myself all over again. So, to number from 0, or to number from 1 to 26, you only need 5 digits. And I think I wrote the letter Z on here. Yeah, Z is 1, 1, 0, 1. But I can't remember if that's from, I think that's from starting from 0. Right, is that on there? Yep. So that would be the letter Z. That would be the letter A, B, C, D, and so on. A, B, C, D. So it's like to write the letter D, he would use the typeface without hooks or without hooks or tails. And then for the ones, it's hard to write like this, I've just discovered. He would use the letters with the tails on it. So you would have to go through and divide up, take whatever he written, take out all the spaces and just write it all out, and then divide it by 2. How come that didn't come out? A, B. I need another letter here. Let's see. An E. Sorry. But you always got to have groups of 2. But, no wait, it's groups of 5. God damn it. So it's a groups of 5. So you take what he wrote and you write it out into groups of 5. And I'm sorry if I just confuse you all because I'm confusing myself here. But you write it out in groups of 5 and you take the ones, that didn't have tails, and you make those zeros, and you take the ones that did have tails, and you make those ones. And there you have, for every 5 letters, you have your 1 letter for the code. So that is a 5-to-1 ratio. But it's still using 2 elements. So that's another thing I look for is, you know, if someone's using a beacon code, God, I'm screwing this up. See, this is why it took me 800 takes. So if someone's using a beacon code, you know, you're looking for 2 different elements, even though they're in different letters, but it's still 2 elements, but in different letters. And then you can group them into the lowest denominator, which is 5, and work out your code that way. The next one, I know I've confused you all, but believe me, this will pay off in the end. Like I said, I want you to work for this clue, and I'm still getting to the clue. So the third one, and you see I have 3. Yeah, I'm getting away from binary right now. It's driving me crazy. But the next one is 3, and 3. There's only one I could think of that's 3, and that is Morse code. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, but Morse code is 2. It's dots and dashes. Well, it's not, because you got to differentiate. You got to make a difference between. You know, there's a space in between each. You know, so if you had just a bunch of dots and dashes, you could divide that up and make a whole number of words on it. You could work on that forever and never solve it. So you got to have something that says, okay, these are the breaks in between the letters. And I actually had a code. For some reason, I always see this in relation with grass. People are like, okay, you know, here's some grass, and they always kind of clump it together. So the clumps have the space in between, and the clumps are the dots and dashes for each word. But you see there's 3 elements. There's tall grass, there's short grass, and there's spaces between the grass. So that's 3 elements. Another thing I did, and my web page is gone. Let me see if I can draw this. I called it my mountain road code. My mountain road code. So here's a mountain road. And what I did was I drew cars. And I even made some pickup trucks. I think my original was a lot better than this. But basically what I did was any cars in this lane was a dot, and any cars in that lane was a dash. So what did I do to show the spaces between the letters? Is I would put signs, like here's a no passing sign, and here's a speed limit sign. So the signs, you know, if you draw the signs through, now you got dot, dot, dash, dash, dot. It was Morse code. I think someone actually solved that, but they didn't solve my other code. But yeah, so I just drew, and the picture was really elaborate. I drew this long road, and I had lots of cars on it, and I had driveways, and I had signs, and so it might have been hard to see that, hey, this was Morse code. But that's a way you can hide Morse code. And I can't remember if Carlos always had a Morse code. I didn't watch all of his videos. I just watched like maybe the solve for 2 or 3 of his. But yeah, so when you see elements of 3, that's why I always think of Morse code. And now we're down to 5 again. I know I confused 5 with 2 when I was doing the beacon code, but 5 is the one that a lot of people use. And again, it's 5. You're using 5 elements to encode each letter. And you've probably all seen this. 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. You've probably all seen this. It is the Polybius Square. It's one a lot of people come back to because it's just so easy to encode. So what you do is you have 5 elements. Whoops. I said 5 and I wrote 5. And you put, there's 2 ways of doing this. Actually, there's an infinite way of doing this. So you put A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I'm going to go out to the letter K, because normally the baseline for a Polybius square is you combine the I and the J into the same square. And what Michael Stather did, every code in his book was a Polybius square. He just had different ways of doing the ones and five, of doing the numbers. In the case of the one I solved, there were circles. He had a circle with a dot, a double circle with a dot, and I can't remember what the other one was. A circle with a circle, something like that. But the thing about this is you kind of need a key. So he had actually the actual, for effect, it's right here. He had the actual, in every single one of his codes, so for instance, in this one, it was the shape of the spaces in the border. And if you look, there's one part of the border, somewhere in here, where he had these 5 lined up. And so you knew that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. I don't know if I can find the snail offhand. But every one of his codes was a Polybius square. So here's one where the acorns face different directions. And then he also had different size acorns. So in the picture, where's this picture at? In the picture, I don't know if you can see this, but there are acorns around the border. And they're different sizes and they're different orientations. So that's 1 through 4. And that's, so he just used this one here. There was the color of the leaves, and each leaf had 2 halves, and each half had 5 colors in it. So, and again, each one he shows the Polybius square, and he shows the solve. But what he coded in the book, in the story part, was that, Zach had a dream. He saw 5 rows of 5 boxes each, and each box had one thing in it, and there was one thing missing. So that was a clue that you had 25, because there's 25 squares in a Polybius square, but there's 26 letters in the alphabet. So because he said there was one thing in each box, that was a clue that he didn't. And the thing that he did was he encoded that there's something missing in the book. And I'm not even sure who figured it out, but they figured out that the letter Q is nowhere to be found in the book. Nowhere to be found. And so that was the thing that was missing. So if you write this out, he didn't combine the I and the J. He used different, here we go. You put the I and the J, but he left out the Q. So he actually had one letter in each square. And that was his modification to the Polybius square. Because if someone were to use an actual Polybius square, well, it's funny because like the first row and a half would always come out right. But there's another way of doing this. That's a modified Polybius square. So think to yourself, modified. So you still got a 5 by 5 square, but you're going to modify it. So let's say, and you got to have a keyword for this. So somewhere along the line, you got to tell people your keyword. And let's say my keyword is Randy. So you put the keyword in first. R-A-N-D-Y. So you put the keyword in first, and then you put the alphabet in, skipping the letters you've already put in. And so this keyword can be anything like up to 10 letters long. It still makes sense. So instead of an A, I've already used the A, so A, B, C. I already used a D, E, F, G, H, I. And I'm going to combine those two because I haven't indicated that any letters are missing. So H, I, J, K, L, M. Now I use the N, L, M, N, O, P, Q. I've already used the R, S, T, U, V, W, X, and I've already used the Y. So there's a modified Polybius Square. It's modified with a keyword. So this changes the whole code. You still got 1 through 5, and you're still going to look for 5 elements and combine them into pairs. But it's not going to make sense unless you have the keyword. And the keyword would have to be encoded somewhere in the code. I'm going to back up. Let me see. I'm going to go through my notes. I got to make sure I covered everything. Otherwise, the rest of this video won't make sense. I wanted to say, I have in my notes here talking about real-world applications of these codes. One of the coolest, and I hate to say coolest because it was really, really sad, but one of the applications of this that I think was the most powerful, maybe, use of these codes was, I can't remember if it was the Korean War or the Vietnam War, but the American prisoners were forced to read statements that denounced America. And of course, they were being forced to do this. And one guy blinked Morse code while he was reading the statement. And he blinked out the word torture. And the next guy, and I think it was a couple of the other guys, blinked out SOS while they were reading their statement. So they were hoping that someone would notice that, and someone did notice that. And it was a way to say, hey, we're reading this under duress. We're reading this because we were tortured. And that message did get out, so the Americans understood that, hey, you know, even though they say they're not being tortured, they're being tortured, and they're being forced to read these statements. And I always thought that was, you know, that was a nice example of a real world code being used. Another example, and again, these are codes you want to be found. Another, you know, and I say it's a real world, but when I was a kid growing up, one of the things, you know, I used to read Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and Sherlock Holmes. I read all these novels, and they were like geared towards kids anyway. So I know one of them there was a woman who was kidnapped, and she wrote her ransom note, and in her ransom note she misspelled things. And this is why I'm not saying there's a misspelling code in any of my books, but this is why when I see people harp on typos, I just let it go, because it's an unintentional red herring. But you know, this woman was kidnapped, and they forced her to write her own ransom note. And when the police got it, there was a lot of misspellings, and I think it was Nancy Drew, and she was like, you know, if you take all the letters that are missing and you take all the letters that are added in, you've got, it spells out like, I'm at section 72 at the docks, you know, I'm at warehouse 5 at the docks, something like that. And so she actually wrote the code into her ransom note, hoping that someone would see the misspellings and figure out what the code was. Another code, and nobody does this anymore, and it's really sad. But like, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I actually dug this out. I had something like this. It was an old transistor radio. And I found out at an early age that if you took a transistor radio apart, you have these radio frequency adjusters, and you could make an AM. This is just a basic AM radio, and by playing with these, you can make it into a shortwave radio. And so what I would do, and at night, short waves bounce off the atmosphere, and so you can hear short waves from literally all over the world. And at night, I would play with this, and I have my screwdriver, and I would like really slowly turn it, and you can pick up number stations. And if you haven't heard of number stations, then you're probably very young. But I used to sit there and just listen to number stations, and a lot of them were Morse code, and they would do the same numbers over and over again. Sometimes it was an actual human voice reading numbers. Sometimes it was, actual numbers being broadcast, and or letters or words, and just repeating. And then like you'd listen to it a couple of nights later, and it would be something different. And they know these were messages geared towards somebody who needs to pick up this message without being conspicuous. So everyone gets the message, but it only means something to the one person that gets it. And a lot of those codes, they were never cracked. They were just random numbers as far as we can tell. There are a few number stations still in existence. And I did actually go out and buy a proper shortwave radio. And like when I went camping a couple weeks ago up in Wyoming, that's one of the things I did was I took out my shortwave radio in the middle of the night, and I just sat there and listened. And it's funny because there's not so many number stations now, but there's a lot of crazy people with transmitters, and so I would sit there and listen to crazy people with transmitters. But yeah, and I always thought, early on when I was trying to design treasure hunts, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I encoded a frequency in the story and had a number station, and the number station had part of the code in it. The problem with that is you get the FCC involved, or if you're on one of the free frequencies, you're using a frequency that someone else could be using for a long time. And then I thought, well, maybe I can say it's going to be broadcast at this frequency only from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and Eastern time or whatever, and then just broadcast the message for 2 hours every night. But then that takes a lot of effort. If no one solves your code for 2 years, you've got to get up or arrange somehow for your message to be broadcast, between 2 and 4 every night until someone solves it. Another thing I thought of, and I actually, when I lived alone at the other house, I was always kind of crazy. And I'm into gadgets. Even though I'm into antiques, I like gadgets. And that's not the same as liking computers. But one of the things I did, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have like a big pole above the tree line and have a light on top that flashes Morse code? And if you did this in the mountains, or if you did this even on a flat plane, that light could be seen for miles and miles. So you can encode something in your book to go to a certain location at night and look north, and you'll know what the rest of the code is. And so I actually built this, and what I did was I took a nautical light, because a nautical light, on the front of your boat you have a red and green for port and starboard, and on the back you have a stern light that's white. Well, nowadays they make these out of LEDs, which means you can turn them off and on very quickly without a light bulb having to warm up and dim down. So it's just off and on. And then I hooked that to a light diode. And then I took an old cell phone and I downloaded a Morse code app that flashes the flashlight on the back of the phone. It'll cause that to flash a message in Morse code. And I would just set that in front of the photo transistor, the photo reader. And when the light flashed, it would trigger the transistor, which would trigger the light. So I could flash Morse code on my phone, and that light would flash the same Morse code. So I thought, well, I could just set this up. I can put that light on a pole, put the phone down here. There's probably more reliable ways of doing it, but I just put the phone in front of the photo. What is that thing called? The photo receiver, it's a diode that detects light and then puts a charge out. Or triggers a relay that puts the charge out. So I could just set that, and I actually practiced this. You know, I would set it up, and I would, because I had 4 bedrooms and I was a single person. So I'd set this up in a bedroom, and I'd come back a couple of days later, and I'd peek in there, like it was still flashing the Morse code. I thought that would be a cool way to do a boots on the ground hunt. And I always liked that idea. And going back to the binary, it's funny because I have another sister channel called Solomon Voynich, and I'm reading binary code, you know, orally. And when I'm reading this code, it's like I am you know, reading ones and zeros, 1 0 1 1 0 0 1 0 1. But what a lot of people who found the channel and is like, okay, this has got to be some kind of code, and it's binary, so let's divide it into 8s and then we'll put it into a binary converter and see what message it is. And they would always get gibberish, and then they would give up. And what they didn't understand was, at the beginning of every video, I told you what video it was, so you could never mix the videos up. So on the video number 1, I went 1 1 0 0 1 0 0 0, and they would always include that 1. So because they included that 1, it like bumped every number off, and you'd always get gibberish. Now if they'd watch the second video, they would see me go 2 1 0 0 1, and then if they watched the next video, they would see me go 3 1 0 0 1 0. So it's like, because they didn't persevere, and it wasn't even intentional. I didn't even intentionally do that. I just, the few times I saw people talking about the Solomon Voynich panel, that's the first thing that came, and I wanted to shake them and go, you stupid people, watch the other videos and you'll figure it out. And you know, so if they knew to take off that first one and then put the rest of the ones and zeros in, you would get a clear message. And it does work, because I've tried it. But anyway, I'm looking at the time because I got to be exact on the time. I'm not going to tell you why. But anyway, I got one more part to this video. And I just want to say that in this video is the clue. And the clue, I've given you all the things you need to solve for the clue. And but I'm going to give out my hint. And my hint is, I wonder if there's a way I can encode the hint offhand on the fly. But there is a sequence of numbers in the book. And the sequence of numbers is based on a very famous sequence of numbers. And about halfway through, I wonder if I can demonstrate this. I used to study, and I still do when I can. There's a wonderful, wonderful 3-part documentary called The Code, and it's from I think it's a BBC, but it's a 3-part documentary called The Code. I believe it's either on Netflix or Hulu, but look for it because it's just a marvel. I always recommend it whenever I can. But let's say, let me see if I get this right. And it deals with fractals and patterns in nature. So let's say you start with a triangle, and then you add a triangle to each side. And then you got a triangle with a triangle, and you got to assume these are all identical. And then for each flat spot, you add another triangle, and that's even harder to do. Did I get them all? So now you got, and this is called fractals. Each piece is a smaller piece of the original part. And then you can go through, and I'm not going to do them all, but you can go through and add the next layer. That's hard because I'm awful at drawing on the fly. But the more and more you draw, the more it becomes just a general shape. And you can get down to like the microscopic, and there are lots of programs out there, and I recommend them to go out and do, and there's famous fractals, and you can zoom in, and the more you zoom in, the more you find that the smaller parts are exactly the same as the larger parts. So if you were to start zooming in on here, of course that's right there is a triangle, and it matches the original triangle. And when you zoom in, you'll see all the littler triangles on top of that, and so on and so forth. But if there's an anomaly, let me clear the side. If there's an anomaly in the fractal, then that throws off the whole thing. So now you got the shape is going to be the correct shape for a part of it, and then the incorrect shape for the other part. I missed two parts here. So your shape kind of goes off at a tangent, and this can be the same as when you're using strings of numbers. If you're using strings of numbers that follow a certain pattern, and let's take the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence is you always add the previous number to the next number to get the next number. So you got 0, 1, 1 plus 0 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 3 is 13, and so on. So if there's a number that's an anomaly, so let's say 1, instead of 1 plus 1 is 2, there was an anomaly there, and that became 3. So now the next number, you've developed a new sequence. 1 plus 3 is 4, 4 plus 3 is 7, 7 plus 4 is 11, 7 plus 11 is 18. I had to think there for a minute. So you've developed, because of the anomaly, normally it goes like this, but because of the anomaly, it branched off and created a new sequence of numbers. And that's how these things work. And this is the pure mathematical way, but in nature, nothing in nature is perfect. So you might have the little anomaly that breaks off and creates a new sequence of numbers. So if you are examining a long sequence of numbers and you find an anomaly in it, that's my hint. It means something, but I wouldn't dwell on it, because you still come out with the same results in the end, kind of. So what I'm saying is, yes, the anomaly means something, but how do I say it? It means something, but if you can't figure out what it means, you can still arrive at the same conclusion. Anyway, I think I got through this, and I'm going to go through it now. I got my part 3 I got to add, and just to that everything you need to solve, everything is in this video, and every part of the video, from, I don't know, the length of the video, every part of the video is going to be important in solving the overall. But so here's the next part. I'm going to add it. I call it my messy desk code, and I always pay homage to things I've seen in the past, and so the messy desk code is an homage to a code I saw when I was a kid. I've been in this for so long, but when I was a kid, and I've never been able to find this book again, and I every time I'm on eBay, I do searches for it. But it was a book about messy desk drawers, and each desk drawer was messy, but it had a code in it. So this is my homage to whatever that book was. I call it my messy desk code, and everything you need to figure everything out, I've said in this video. So, and when you do figure it out, you will have the major clue, which will break this thing open. Like I said, it's probably going to cause some people to go, "What? I'm dropping out. I'm not doing this no more." And it might cause other people to go, "Oh, I'm going to dig into this further." So yes, it is a significant clue. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this part up so we can get to the next part. These are marked kosher and gluten-free.